and welcome back from lunch. I hope you've all had a chance to nourish yourselves, get refreshed, and chill out with some of that amazing music we just were treated to in here. My name is Julie Roll. I'm the founder of Revivis Consulting. I'm pleased to share this moment and this time and space with you on these Indigenous lands, a place where people have gathered for many millennia and have had important conversations like the ones we're having today. The first speaker today is Bo Aganaba, founder and principal of Good Being Co. Bo has been busy today and the last few days. Not only has he been preparing for his talk coming up just now, but he's also been facilitating the Youth Hackathon. So he's been pretty active. Bo's curiosity about the self-actualization process and that journey has led him to the work that he's doing now with Good Being Co. And his talk's going to tie in with some of the themes from this morning around how can we ask better questions, make sure we're solving the right problems, and importantly, tell better stories. So please join me in welcoming Bo to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Julie, for the introduction. It's good to be here. This is my first Energy Disruptors, so I didn't know what to expect, but it's been absolutely an amazing experience so far, and I hope that you share that sentiment with me. So for today's talk here, I've got just a few minutes to share some thoughts around building better, using better questions and stories to build tomorrow's economy. So my name is Bo Aganaba. I'm the founder and principal of Good Being Co. And my work with Good Being really involves introducing these values of sustainability and wellness into the workplace with individuals, businesses, organizations, etc. And I also put advocate of joy here because I believe this is also part of my personal responsibility. Part of my orientation, part of how I see the work that I do is to spread joy, and I understand joy as that feeling of being glad to be alive. That's something that I feel like I have a responsibility to share with people, and that really informs the work that I do as well. People who know me well know that I love quotes, and so anytime I give a talk, I like to have a few quotes in. I've got one here from Joanna Macy. It says, "Because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal, it's not a matter of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting, but as we work to heal the earth heals us. No need to wait." One of the reasons I love this quote is because I think it points to something that we often miss, which is that our own well-being and the well-being of the earth are intrinsically tied together. In some ways, they are two sides of the same coin. Over half of Gen Zs and millennials say that they research a brand's environmental impact and policies before accepting a job offer. 1 in 6 Gen Zs and millennials say that they have changed jobs or sectors due to climate concerns, with a further 25% of Gen Zs and 23% of millennials saying that they plan to do so in the future. Before I started Good Being, I was the executive director of a sustainability nonprofit, working primarily with young people who were either sustainability professionals themselves or community organizers, activists, etc. And we had a lot of companies and organizations wanting to get in front of these young people because they wanted the best and brightest talent, or they were having trouble retaining that talent. And through the conversations that I had with young people, and also with these different businesses and organizations, what I realized, what I started to see is that some of these young people felt like they couldn't bring their values into the workplace. They felt like there was a little bit of a disconnect between who they are as individuals, who they see themselves as individuals, and the kind of work that they were doing in their workplaces. But it's not just the talent that is looking to feel like their values are represented by who they do business with. It's also coming from consumers. It's also increasingly coming from investors. They want to feel good about who they do business with. And so we're at a time where we're eager for new values to be introduced into the workplace, introduced into how we think about what the economy is and what it is for. So in many real respects, we're in a time of transition. And in other respects, we're kind of always in a time of transition. but it's really about being cognizant or being aware of what these times of transitions are asking from us. Having an awareness of some of the challenges that we're facing, right? Whether it's climate change or biodiversity loss or inequality. These are signals from our society, signals from our world asking us to pay attention to different things. And sometimes it means that we have to let go of old ways of doing things so that we can bring in new ways of doing things that are more responsive to what some of these questions are asking from us. So how do we start to ask the right questions? How do we start to pay attention to the ways of being that we are being invited towards? One of my mantras is to say yes to what is. I love this saying because it reminds me that there's always a context in which I can find myself in. And that if I'm not aware of that context, it becomes difficult to know how to respond appropriately. I think one of the challenges that we often face is not really accepting the reality of our situation. That there's some internal resistance that we have at really accepting what it is that we are invited to pay attention to. So if we can say yes to what is and accept our situation, maybe then our choices that we make and how to respond to that situation can be more appropriate. What questions are being forced? Sometimes we force questions because we're still stuck in that old paradigm. We're still stuck in those old ways of doing things. And we keep asking those same questions because we think we're going to find a solution. But we haven't actually accepted the reality of where we're at. And sometimes we're protecting ourselves because we're not really ready to have some of those conversations that we need to. We feel a little bit afraid because maybe some of the ways that we are doing things are actually contributing. They're actually contributing harm to our world, to our society. And we're not ready to accept that responsibility. So we're avoiding those questions and we're avoiding those conversations. And always return to the fundamental why. This can help us ask the right questions as well. And what is the fundamental why? The fundamental why is really about purpose. It's really about understanding that our purpose, how we internalize it, is about a story. It's about a story that we're telling ourselves about who we are as an individual, about where we're going, and about how our personal stories are connected to bigger stories. The work that you're doing as an individual has a connection with the story that your business is doing in society. And that has a connection with the story that our society is telling about which direction it's headed in or where it's going. But are we really aware of what those stories are? And are we intentional about the kind of stories that we're telling and that we're sharing with each other as individuals, as businesses, as communities, and as a world? Many of our stories are actually inherited, and we're not aware of them. I spent the first decade of my life in England. And I remember as a young boy coming over with my family to the US, visiting family friends. And we went to the movie theater, and somehow, I still don't remember how exactly I got in, but I went to see The Patriot, which was inappropriate for my age at the time. For those of you who don't know, it's a movie with Mel Gibson. And it's really about the War of Independence between America and Britain. And as a young English kid, I just remember being so confused because I always thought Britain was the good guys. So what's going on here? This was the first time that I became aware that that's actually a story. It's an assumption that I had that was not necessarily shared with everybody. And these stories really inform our worldview and how we see ourselves. We're seeing this definitely in politics. Right? This kind of fracturization that we have between different political ideologies. They really do, in some meaningful sense, live in different worlds. And yet, if you talk to people, you ask them, what is it that you want? They say, we want opportunity. We want community. It sounds very similar on both sides. So how can we work to actually create better shared stories where we can see ourselves all represented in the stories that we're telling? And we can see ourselves all celebrated and uplifted in those stories as well. It's another quote from Paul Hawken. I did see that. I think one of his books are for sale in the bookstore there. So if you haven't heard of him, check him out. And this quote, the most radical, complex climate technologies on Earth are the human heart, head, and mind. Something that I've learned from many of the wisdom traditions around the world, including many of the indigenous traditions that we have, is that there isn't actually a separation between humanity and nature, that we are actually a manifestation, a reflection, a continuation of nature. It's not us here, me as an individual, a human here, and then nature out there somewhere, but that we are actually continuous. Every time I breathe out, I am giving of myself to the world. And each breath I take in, it's the world coming into me, becoming myself. There's this connection and relationship and continuity with nature and the natural world. And in some ways, that's a story that we can tell about ourselves, reminding us of who we really are. I love to use this metaphor, this imagery of nature, to inform how I think about the world and how I think about the different components of how we interact with society. Even something like the economy, we can liken it to an ecosystem of businesses and individuals interacting with each other. And healthy ecosystems really thrive when there's this balance between competition and cooperation that creates thriving, diverse communities. So how can we use this metaphor when we're thinking about our own businesses, when we're thinking about the type of problems that we're trying to solve? Are those problems related to this bigger picture that we're seeing of society, about this bigger picture of how we have different ecosystems coming together to create these thriving and diverse communities? Or are they individual problems that we've picked out because we think that there's a market opportunity there? Does your problem have a hypothesis of how solving this problem is going to contribute to greater human well-being? Or is it disconnected from that bigger story? If we're not cognizant of how the problems that we're trying to solve through our businesses and organizations are not going to create conditions for human well-being and human flourishing, what is it that we're really doing here? So this requires leadership, of course. It requires us to show up in certain ways. And an increase in leadership, an increase in responsibility, means an increase in exposure and visibility. Some of the conversations I've been having recently include fears around legislation, such as this new bill, C-59, and people feeling afraid about what that means. But it can also be an invitation to vulnerability, an invitation to authenticity. Because what I'm also hearing from these same young people who are looking to experience and express their values is that they're not looking for perfection. They're looking for experimentation. They're looking for trying. They're looking for effort. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. They don't want perfection. But they want to feel like they can trust you. They want to feel like you're authentic and that your vulnerability is matching their own, because they're showing up with the intention of trying to make this world a better place, and they're inviting our businesses and organizations to do the same. It's okay to fail. It's okay to set targets and not meet them, as long as you are actually trying. And when you do fail, it's also an invitation for you to share what went wrong. What did we miss? So that the rest of us can also learn from your failures. Failures are an opportunity to grow and an invitation to try again in a better way, because we have learned what didn't work. So if we can accept the reality that we will try and we will fail, just like nature experiments, and sometimes it doesn't always work. But when it does, we all benefit. Here's my final quote, this one from Howard Thurman, who was a great towering intellectual during the civil rights era. And he says, "Look well to the growing edge. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree, the roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth, against a time where there shall be new lives, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge." And I love this quote because it reminds me that the earth is always in a state of becoming. And we have an invitation to join that journey of becoming as well. Thank you very much.